Welcome to our podcast called We Were Gamers, a podcast where we've completely lost the thread and only talk about Evangelion.
Is your ego boundary dissolving, Andrew?
I'm just a pool of LCL.
Yes.
Welcome to 176 episodes of video games, and then when we tried to get metaphysical. I'm Andy, that's JJ.
Hello.
And Michael is here too.
Yep, without my AT field.
Oh man.
Oh no, gross.
You're not here. So you're not here.
Well, or he's everywhere.
Only if we accept instrumentality?
Yes.
Hmm.
We're going to talk about End of Evangelion here, which then means we have spoilers for literally everything in all of the canonical Evangelion series. So
we are going to say
canonical,
how many well, I mean, I guess we're not expanding. We haven't done manga,
and we're not talking about any of the Rebuild movies. Which none of us have seen.
Yeah. Also, probably throw out a big old content warning.
Oh
right up front.
Oh boy, yeah.
I'll go ahead and apologize to you both and everyone else who I inadvertently dragged into watching this movie. This movie's a rough watch. This was my first time seeing it also. I had never seen it before.
Oh.
Okay.
I thought you were ahead of us on this.
Oh, well, that changes the discussion.
I viewed it a second time before this podcast, but when it came out on Netflix was the first time I'd ever seen it.
All right.
It certainly was a thing to watch that we saw.
I was going to just text you right off the bat when that movie started. Like, I don't feel good
comfortable
over
with
here.
This.
I don't want to watch. I don't want to watch. But then I kept watching.
It's a really uncomfortable movie, and I don't think it gets better.
No. The whole time is uncomfortable.
Yes.
The whole way.
It's a bad feeling the whole way.
More than once, I was like torn between my desire to do this podcast, my desire to understand something that people love, and my desire to turn it off.
I think that's a fair place to be. On a second viewing, I will say the horror aspect of how awful everything that's going on is diminished a little bit because you kind of already know where it's going to go, but it doesn't make it less uncomfortable. That's not great.
Okay. So last content warning before we get started here. JJ, one of our big questions, at least my big question last time was, what is this movie?
Yes.
Let's start there before we even get going, I think.
Sure.
You have an opinion on what this movie is?
Michael?
So I think the where I placed this movie was in between episodes 24 and 25.
You think 25 still happens?
I think 25 still happens after these two episodes.
Interesting.
And I can get into why I think that as we discuss.
Okay.
So I think I agree with Michael's opinion, and I want to say that I believe the community still has debate about this. It's not settled whether this is an intended replacement for 25 and 26, or whether they're concurrent somehow, or whether they are, just one before or after, or what order. There's definitely discussion about that.
It struck me in its construction as a replacement for 25, 26.
And I believe the quotes that have come out from the production team or whatever is this is truer to the ending we wanted to do, but weren't able to do because of budget, time, money, who knows, whatever.
Many records that I saw, people have cast it as an alternate ending as well.
Yes.
And I think you see it referred to, the last two episodes here referred to as 25 Prime and 26 Prime.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay.
And there are definitely, like Michael said, there are definitely some clues that maybe parts of what is happening in 25 and 26 could still be going on, perhaps in the characters' minds or something.
Well, definitely there are some clues in 25, 26 that this is connected, at least because you see scenes like Misato lying on the ground, having been shot, and
Right, and
Ritsuko the same. Yep.
and Asuka at the bottom of the lake. Yeah.
Asuka at the bottom of the lake. That's right. And all those
So-
were jumbled mess of just like, some stuff happened while this instrumentality thing was going on, or before,
Right.
or during, or after, or whatever. Like.
Yeah.
And then they just leaned into the metaphysics of all of it. I guess we should save our opinions and our theories and all that stuff for after what we normally do, as we've done for 4, where we kind of walk through it all. Unless you guys don't want to walk through it all, I feel like we have to.
I am. Oh, go ahead, Michael.
No, I was just going to say we could do a quick recap of what happens before diving into the what it means.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I don't know how useful it is to recap everything that happens, because both so much and so little happens in ways.
I feel like a lot of stuff, plot-wise, actually does occur, which might, in the end, affect...
A lot in like 25, though, right? Or what is 25 prime here.
Sure.
And then you get the credit sequence in the middle, and then it goes to 26. And kind of 26 is metaphysics.
Okay. I think we were kind of right at the end of some of it. Basically, everybody dies.
Yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah.
Off the bat, is that the most logos that you guys have ever seen in the beginning of a film?
Well, I was super bummed that we didn't get the intro song.
Yeah. That was sad.
Well,
Although I
Sega got
believe
their
the-
logo in there, though.
Yes,
yeah,
Sega,
that was what?
I really want to know like the legacy of like where did all these logos come from? Because there are like 6 at the start.
Oh,
or
it's
something.
more. It's
a lot.
way more than that. It's double. It's like a dozen.
You
Yeah.
expect like 2 or 3 at
Sure.
like the start of a normal
Every
like
movie.
movie, and then it just like it keeps going.
It must
Although the second one actually isn't totally out of left field, because in that episode where Asuka is having the sleepover with their class president, she's playing Sega Genesis.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. They may have also made games for this. I'm assuming they made games for this.
Probably.
You would think so.
I don't have the heart to talk about the beginning of this, but I guess that he's not gay from what this means here.
Well, I don't know that necessarily means that either.
Okay, good point.
But yeah, some real gross stuff goes on at the very start. And
Stuff that is not okay then and not okay now, and
No.
weirdly, I assume Japanese. Very.
I mean, I don't think it's portrayed as okay either in this.
Yeah.
No.
And even like throughout it later, Asuka makes a reference that kind of makes it sound like maybe this is a habit of his, which is double extra gross.
Oh, really? I did not catch that.
Yeah.
There's a line somewhere in the middle that's like, I know I'm like your jerk off fantasy or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But I didn't catch that it was like a thing this graphically that he did beforehand. But
not sure if it's, but people have read it to mean that in some cases.
Interesting. Yeah, wow. And it just leans me into a problem that I have with this show and this movie, which is that Shinji is supposed to be our character that we follow, relate to, understand to be important to the plot, and may even drag us into understanding the metaphysics and the design of this show by its creator, right? It said that he put many of his own demons into this character. I wanted to try to understand him, but moments like that and many moments later in this movie especially, just make me hate him.
Yeah. Totally fair.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
The movie explains a little bit better. Essentially, instrumentality becomes ascension, as life on Earth turns into one perfect single quote-unquote life form, right?
So they talk a bit about Lilith and Adam and the combination of them together returning back to the beginning of creation and something like that, right?
Which, if people, it's apocrypha, but it's kind of out there that Adam's first wife was Lilith, and she was cast out of the garden by Adam before meeting Eve, right? Before meeting Eve, being gifted Eve. I don't know how you want to get into all that and the Bible and etc. But interesting that they chose Lilith for the understanding of a second creation, right? Instead of Eve.
Sure, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Again, JJ, you've pointed out that maybe it doesn't mean anything that they chose all these things, but it's especially in this movie stacks up to feel like they had to have known all this stuff, and so it should mean something. Especially in this movie.
I think one of the producers has come out and said there were no Christians on the development of this thing, and we chose these things because we thought they looked cool. They don't really have any religious significance, because if they did, we didn't know it.
Interesting.
Well,
but maybe they've absorbed it through, general knowledge or, researching, or who knows.
It's interesting then that they get the code 666.
It's a cool number.
As 5 Magi systems from around the world decide to try to break into Magi system in Japan, Tokyo 3.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time as that, the SSDF. Do we remember what that stands for?
Isn't it
it's JSSDF.
Okay.
Yeah. The Japanese Strategic Self-Defense Force?
Okay.
It's something like that.
Well, they should just call them mass murderers.
Oh, gosh, because they're good at it.
Yeah,
Basically,
it turns out Nerve was not really built to fight against, people-sized enemies.
Well, they have some lines about that, right? They cut their anti-terrorism budget.
I like that they filled
some of the text speculate on whether that was intentional.
Yeah. There's a lot of this that I don't understand. We'll get to it, I guess. Maybe here is a good spot. It's like that analogy you made the other day, Michael, with Lost. Sometimes they have these loose threads that they don't connect, even in a, oh man, I had to think about that for a minute fashion, where there's the Mardoff.
Oh, the Mardoch
group. There's Sela, there's Nerve, there's Japan, there's the UN, there's Gendo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all of them seem to be on the same page, but all of them seem to be at odds with each other. But who's in charge of what? In budget, and Sela cut the budget for this thing, but it was funded by the UN. But I get lost when trying to understand, like in this moment when the people in the command center are like, oh, but Sela cut our budget for self-defense. It's like, but
where are the lines drawn?
Yeah.
Sure. I think it's intentionally vague a bit, but you are right. They also do a terrible job of explaining it.
And I don't mind if it's not laid out in front of me, but behind the scenes, if you know how these things are connected, it probably would have been clearer.
Sure. So I think, we can say now, the UN funds the group of Nerve, who is notionally controlled by Sela. That council of black monoliths or whatever. Which
ended up being the council that we already knew of?
I believe the implication there is that the Instrumentality Council, who we saw them meeting with before, were like some members of Sela, not all of them.
And I think I had just kind of assumed that.
I did not assume that. I thought
it didn't really surprise me when you started to actually see members of the one council start taking the place of the monoliths.
Right. You definitely see that one dude with the visor
Yeah, and I think it was just because they've already painted them as this sort of shadowy cabal that is pulling the strings of everything.
Yep. Yeah, that's sort of how I read it also. It's definitely like this is the conspiracy in control of the world or whatever.
This is one of those areas where maybe if we did some research on their fan wiki, it might have been laid out by some manga or something.
I don't know. I have done some of that research now.
Okay.
I don't know that it is all directly laid out like that.
Okay.
But the implication is definitely that, like, these people are who's in charge, and that Gendo doesn't actually want to do what Sela is asking him to do here.
Very clearly.
When it's like pretty close to this point, right? They contact him and are like, "Hey, we don't have the spear anymore. We're going to do the third impact. You need to give us Ava Unit 1."
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess where this lost me a little bit here is it seems like they're all after instrumentality, but they all seem to want a different flavor of it. Is that kind of how you guys interpreted this?
Yeah, so I had a hard time understanding that because all the organizations have been creating this thing to do what they wanted to do. The UN wanted it to fight to stave off the third impact. Other people didn't want the third impact until the 17th angel came. Gendo wants the third impact, but because he touches Lilith with Adam. Like, what?
So I think there are things we can find out here, right? Mm-hmm. So the UN and Japan, I guess the Japanese government more notionally, are there because Nerve is there to protect them from the angels. They don't have any of this instrumentality stuff. They don't know about it. That's why it's done by the secret shadow organization.
But they've been sent there nominally by the government, but actually by Sela,
who is in control of everything, right?
Yeah.
Sela wants and they talk about it a little bit later when they kind of start the weird ritual or whatever they're doing. But they talk about they are looking for instrumentality in that they will join into the Ava and sort of become the God consciousness or whatever above all the other consciousnesses.
Okay.
They don't make that super. They don't make that super clear, and I did not know about that like specific part of it until I read stuff on the wiki.
Because they took over the extra Avas.
Right, they would merge together with Ava 1, and then all the rest of humanity would merge, I don't know, somewhere else or something. They wanted to be
the god.
They wanted to become a god, and they didn't really care what happened to the rest of humanity. If they merged or not, who cares, whatever, not their problem.
I see.
Got it. Okay.
And whereas Gendo very specifically wants really just to get his wife back.
Yeah, he just wants to merge in a way that lets him see Yui.
Right.
Okay.
And then what ends up happening, well, we'll get to it, I guess, when we get there.
Sure. I didn't know what Bakelite was. Did you know what Bakelite was?
Yes.
Oh, well.
They had talked about it before, but it just was like, oh, okay, it's like, hard goo.
It's hot plastic.
Is it a real thing?
Yeah.
No, it absolutely is.
Okay, I totally thought it was made up.
Well, I looked it up. I was like, okay, very specific to say Bakelite. Like it's either really fake or really real. So I looked it up and I was like, oh my god, they filled the hallway with hot plastic. Oh
yeah, it's the first plastic that was made from synthetic components.
Huh.
So it's probably extremely toxic, is what you're saying?
Today
maybe.
I learned.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a thermosetting resin, basically.
Interestingly, we don't see anybody else in Tokyo 3 who they obliterate Tokyo 3 in this assault. And it's weird. I assume they didn't evacuate everybody? They just blew it all up?
I kind of got the sense that Tokyo 3, well, they make mention of it actually in an earlier episode, but I kind of had the sense reinforced that Tokyo 3 is basically a ghost town at this point.
It's also pretty heavily implied that it's kind of like a company town where like everyone works for the company there. There are no real civilians in Tokyo 3. It's kind of like only people that work for Nerve.
That makes sense.
Although they don't explicitly state that either. So, that's the sense I got from watching it. But,
yeah. All right, so let's get to the next big action scene in this, which is still the plot-heavy episode of the two. Eva 2, finally, Asuka and her mother come to terms, I guess, is what it's implied here.
Yeah, it seems like it.
She accepts her and her mother, whatever. I don't know what to say about that.
Well, I think this is I think we have known kind of for a while, but this is the first time that Asuka actually realizes that it is her mother inside the unit too.
You think so?
Yeah, I don't think she ever put it together why, what the Ava really was or why she was able to sync with it or what was keeping her from syncing. I think this is the first time that she actually puts all the pieces together.
And this is where we get the 9 Avas with S2 drives assault.
Yeah, the mass production Avas are here.
Yeah, this was a great scene.
Yes.
It is a sweet fight scene, absolutely.
Should we talk about the fight scene and then the implications of this fight scene, maybe? But
is there more to talk about other than that it was rad and awesome to watch?
Well,
I think it's interesting to mention that Asuka, at least to me, seems to take on just a little bit of her mom's craziness.
Maybe.
Yeah, she definitely gets very, almost feral-like, where she's just ah!
Yeah, she's always welcomed a fight, but this took on just that slight edge of being a little unhinged to me.
It's the first time she wins, right? I mean, she has to take out 9 Avas in 3 minutes, and she does it.
Yeah.
In a pretty gross but cool because it's, it's giant human robots or whatever they are. Angels. Fighting, and you think she's won, and we'll get to after, but S2 drives.
Mm-hmm.
Explain to me. I had thought they were a thing that came in Angels.
Mm-hmm.
And when Ava 1, quote-unquote, awoke, which it seems like maybe Ava 2 does here, it ate the S2 drives of an angel.
The phrase was that it absorbed one.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How did they get the S2 drives for these ones? Because I don't understand.
I mean, how did they get the one for Unit 0 and Unit 1 to start with? So, I mean, great question. I don't think they answer it, and I don't know.
Yeah.
This is one of those moments where I'm lost because something is unexplained that I don't know if it should be or not, but if it's not going to be explained, it shouldn't have been codified as it was.
I mean, all the Avas we have now learned S2 drives in them, right?
Okay.
So it wasn't a surprise that these had them also. I think it was just more of a surprise that they were able to do what they could with them.
Right. All right. So in the middle of Asuka's fight, we get a lot of other stuff that happens here. Misato finally gets Shinji from whatever the regressed state again of Shinji. Like we're really up and down with this guy.
He doesn't want to pilot the robot.
Again, even though when we left him last, if this is a replacement or alternate or whatever you want to call it, he had decided the only thing that mattered was piloting the thing.
Yeah, it's real uneven. You're right, and especially the movie came out a year or two after the show in real life, but watching it back to back, it feels bad.
Mm-hmm.
This is where I wondered if I didn't hate him so much, whether there's something like mental health thing to be learned or gleaned here, but I don't feel like there is.
Well, I think he's still, and this was one of the things that made me feel like this came in between episodes 24 and 25, is that he seems to have retreated in the wake of killing Kaworu.
Right.
Which kind of cheapens that scene where he chooses to kill him so that humanity survives, right? I guess. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't have a defense here, or even a defense. You get early episodes Shinji who doesn't want to pilot the robot here for a good while.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? But by the end of this movie and the show, have we seen more of the top of Shinji's head than his face?
Maybe.
I think
Yeah,
he's true.
probably.
He does look
probably.
down at the ground a whole
It's
lot.
literally the whole
He's
movie.
sad.
This whole
He's
movie.
sad. Or he's looking up and screaming.
So either his under chin or his head and his hair. They do a good job animating his hair. Those little fronds move around a lot. All right, Misato gets shot here. She's gonna die. She knows she's gonna die. She gets him on the elevator. JJ, your favorite character. Do you want to take uncomfortable scene number 2 here?
No. We could just gloss over this and pretend it didn't happen. This is the Evangelion has problems with sex part 700.
This is regression of Misato part 2, right? We discussed like maybe that scene in the show where Misato's on the bed with him. You know, maybe it's mistaken, or maybe it's. Anyway, she wants to be his mother, but
in a very
there's some Oedipal sin, here.
Gives him the adult kiss.
Yes,
Which is what she says
quote
there.
unquote.
Tells him there's more where that came from.
And then not, because she promptly dies.
Well, I think she knows she's dying at that
she
point,
knows,
clearly.
which is weird, right?
But
she
like,
knows
why
she's-
be? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Why be gross about it when you know you're just about to die? Yeah, it's bad. This show treats women very badly. Not just this movie, this whole show. And here is another prime example of Misato being the coolest character and getting a crap ending.
Well, and it seemed like with the movie is starting here. Not starting here. We went over the beginning. But it really gets rolling right around here.
Yeah. A lot of uncomfortable stuff kicks off at this point.
And it's uncomfortable in a way that, like, if it were done well, there's a heck of a lot of symbolism you could infer from imagery, and even some of the times they treat women badly in this show could be used positively in so far as advancing some sort of, I don't want to say like, what's the right word here? There's metaphor you could infer here, right? Mothers of humanity, etc. But it's kind of just trash. Some of it is just trash. Yeah, we'll get to more later.
I got the impression watching this part of this movie up until like maybe a good part of the way through the next part that really the people who made this movie did not want you to like it.
You think so?
I mean, that's how I felt watching it. I was like, they really just want me to turn this off. That's how I felt.
I really am starting to wonder if we have a different sensibility. I know that it's 20 years ago this movie was made, right?
Right, yeah.
So we have a different global sensibility about some stuff. But even then, some stuff of this would A, have not been okay, and B, made a Western audience very uncomfortable.
And I think it was uncomfortable even at the time.
I mean, there's contemporary anime to this that does have nudity, have underage, et cetera, right? But none of it is this uncomfortable or leave you with this bad of a feeling.
Right, and that's the part where I sort of wonder, like, is the intent to make you feel bad? Because, like, you feel bad.
Yeah, you really do. Ritsuko also treated poorly here.
Yep.
Yeah.
And dead as well.
She just tries to get her revenge on Gendo by blowing everything up, but nope, it doesn't work because it is implied that she's betrayed by her own mother who loves Gendo still.
Yeah, that something that she put into place in the programming prevents the self-destruct.
Which
the
didn't the
woman
computer
side
try
of the
to
mother. Yeah, they show she says, "Oh, mother, you're still defending him."
Mm-hmm.
The three sides of the woman's guide. There's only three: the mother, the scientist, and the woman. Yeah, terrible. And then Gendo just shoots her because that's Gendo.
Yeah, it's implied that he tells her that he loves her, I guess.
Yeah, the silent scene there, it's not clear what he says.
Terrible.
Yes.
No matter what he says, terrible.
Yep, exactly.
This is where part one where I almost turned it off. Right here, coming up with Asuka doing awesome in the fight until a replica of the spear shows up and aces her Ava.
I believe it's implied that is the actual spear.
It is not.
Oh, it's not.
No?
No.
No,
okay.
She thinks it is.
Everyone at that point in time thinks it is.
Right.
Which is weird, right? Like, where does a replica of the spear come from?
Yeah, so they fill in the missing piece, I think, in the next episode.
Okay.
Yeah,
that was
in one of the most disappointing anime scenes I've ever seen. But we'll get there.
Yeah.
Shinji, this is it. This is literally where I just like, can I do the podcast having said I turned it off here? Can I do that? Shinji can't get into his Ava while Asuka is screaming and dying.
Yeah, it's covered in bakelite. What is he supposed to do? He's never done anything. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so she gets disconnected from her power cable. She's got 5 minutes to take them all out, which she manages to do. Yeah.
Yeah, but then she gets aced by the spear. She's screaming in pain. The Avas are attacking her. And the Avas all come back to life here, right?
Right. After the spear shows up, they all regrow.
Somehow.
Yeah, so I think right here it's interesting to mention, up until this point, all of the damage that has occurred to the Avas has been felt mentally by the pilots, but not necessarily physically until Asuka gets hit until Unit 2 gets hit by the spear.
Oh yeah, because she
and then
bleeds,
Asuka
right?
starts basically bleeding from the same eye that Unit 2 gets hit in.
They imply that when the arm is ripped off in one of the earlier episodes, that the kid feels it. I mean, their arm doesn't physically get ripped off, right?
He feels the pain as if it were happening. But it doesn't.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Physically manifest.
It doesn't make them like
getting torn off.
I had wondered if I missed something and Asuka was tearing at her eye, and that's what caused it to bleed.
I think I assume that once she realizes that it's her mother inside it, she achieves a level of sync that is high enough that she actually physically experiences what happens to the Ava.
Yeah, it's implied later that her arm splits like the Ava's arm.
Yep.
Which,
if true, then the way that this ends gets really bad.
Yeah. And Shinji still doesn't get in his Ava.
He doesn't see that. He doesn't know that that's happening, to be fair.
He just sort of hears her.
Yeah.
Right.
I started to wonder if what we're kind of seeing is like a Shinji feedback loop. Where throughout this show, every time he, quote unquote, I don't want to use this phrase, but it implies maybe what I'm thinking, gets better. Because if, you assume he's got depression or anything else like that, there's no quote unquote getting better. But if he has a positive experience is maybe the best way to say this. It then immediately he finds or uses somebody else to send him into a negative spiral.
There is definite. People should go listen to the Waypoint podcasts about this anime. They cover it in much more detail than we do. but also some of the people on that podcast have more personal experiences with mental illness and depression and can talk with it better than I think, at least better than I can. And I will say that they said that, you know, it is definitely an up and down thing, right? Where you are some days good, some days not as good. And that, to them at least, felt somewhat realistic here. It makes for a very frustrating character to follow in an anime and movie, though.
Yeah, and towards the end of the next episode, Shinji definitely acknowledges the loop. He has a moment where I think he says that he's going to stay here, but he's just going to be caught in come to the same conclusions over and over again, I think is how he puts it.
Okay. I don't want to be overly critical of what it seems to be what they've tried to create, but it also is tough. It's just tough to watch sometimes. Yeah, it's frustrating, like you were saying. Yeah. So
totally fair. And then we get the credits.
Yeah. So in the credits, did you spot the one thing that I'm going to mention?
I don't know.
I watched the credits.
Okay.
They translate a line at the end of the credits.
Oh?
Yes. Thank you to all. I didn't write it all down verbatim, but it was something along the lines of thank you to all the cast, crew, sponsor, all that stuff. Thank you to all these people that helped me make this film and the 5 women.
Yikes.
Ooh.
Yes.
Yikes.
Just the cherry on a real uncomfortable Sunday.
It really is, right?
Mm-hmm. Whew. And then episode 26 Prime begins.
Yeah, on that note.
After the credits. And I don't know how much... there's like a couple scenes at the front here, and then just a whole bunch of apocalypse stuff going on kind of throughout the rest of it.
Yeah, it really gets out of control quickly. Well, Shinji... Okay, so she died. Oh, man. Do we have to go in order on this? Yeah, we do.
A little bit.
Real quick, we can.
NOPE, huge letters at the beginning of this.
Uh-huh.
So with Gendo, is that
Gendo
and Rei.
Assaults Rei, and then amorphously...
And then it goes in a weird direction as he pushes his hand into her chest.
Is that the hand that has Adam on it?
Yes, it is.
Yes. And then sort of fishes around in her body, and then there's the moaning sound, thankfully, as the scene cuts away, and I thought, again, about turning it off.
Yeah. Extremely gross. The embryo of Adam that is somehow in his hand is being absorbed into Rei, who they had referred to as the vessel for Lilith here.
Yes, she is very clearly Lilith, right? And I wondered if at this point they said her AT field was breaking down, so it's not holding her together anymore.
Right.
If the implication is that he was trying to...
Gendo tells her to lower her AT field, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But she'll fall apart eventually.
And her arm falls off.
She starts to, yeah.
Is he trying to incubate the Adam embryo in that thing that is Rei?
Well, so again, this is what I have... At the time, I didn't really understand. After the fact, I think she was intended to hold... She was holding Lilith's soul or something.
Right. Yeah, we got that at the end of the show.
And Adam uniting with Lilith's soul and then uniting with actual Lilith is supposed to create, whatever it is that Gendo wants.
It's another impact, right, in theory.
But I think, based on how this actually goes, is that Gendo was supposed to merge with Rei completely.
I see.
And then Rei's actually, nah, dog.
Yeah, actually, nah, dog, I need to go help Shinji.
Yeah.
Which does not pan out in the end, right? I mean, we'll see.
Does it?
I don't know.
We'll get that. I think that's where all the biggest questions here come in. So
Shinji finally loses it and becomes brave. Yay. Because the Ava gets him. Or something.
Yeah, but he doesn't get real far, does he?
He doesn't get real brave either. He recalls the spear, and this is what I was talking about earlier.
Right, yeah.
He pulls the spear down from the moon because he gets into impact mode, and we see the angel wings, just like we saw Adam's wings in the second impact. But then the most disappointing scene in anime happens, and he just sort of does nothing as they crucify Ava 1.
Yeah, and so this is where you find out where that first spear that hit Ava 2 comes from. Their like two-hand blades that they're using can actually turn into Lance clones.
Right, yes. You're right. I had forgotten about that part.
This is kind of where we see actually the Gendo and what's his name that runs the facility? Fuyutsuki had a plan, and the plan did not involve the spear being available to Sayla.
Yep.
So it kind of pans out a little bit there, and then I laughed about as hard as I've laughed this show when they had the anti-AT field.
Yeah, it was expanding.
Yeah.
And then he turns into a giant tree.
Oh, well, is it the tree that happens first?
They kind of like put him in the crucifix mode, right? Where they like hold him out with their AT fields, and then they all line up around him, and a bunch of symbols appear, and then he turns into a tree.
Okay. And you also find out that the geofront is actually the Black Moon.
Oh, right. Yes, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
When he leaves the, when Unit 1 breaks out, he like blows the top off the geofront, and then you see the giant Black Moon in there.
Which means that the moon is the white moon.
Yep.
And
So the angels came from the moon, and we came from whatever this is. Got it. Okay.
The implication is actually that the angels are just aliens from like another planet, and that the Black Moon is like the seed from some progenitor race or whatever, and that if we had gotten a white seed instead of a black seed, we would have had angels instead of humans.
So...
okay.
Which, by the way, none of that is explained in the show. I only found out about all that stuff from the wiki.
It gets very clear here that this is it's very clear later that this is a stand-in for an egg, like a human egg, right?
Yes.
Because later on, a lot of the spirits turn, like the Ray clones and all that sort of stuff, the very, very clearly supposed to be a sperm right later in the way that they show them like swarming the egg, etc. So instrumentality in a way is kind of like, again, like that plays into that creation motif by getting down to the nitty gritty of it, I guess. So everyone's dead, which is one of those things we talked about in the original 25-26. Was everyone dead during instrumentality? And it seems that that's the case. Or they've all turned into goo because their AT fields broke down or whatever.
Everyone turns into LCL.
Yep.
Yeah, but also not. Because then they have forms when they're sucked up by Lilith into the ball. I don't know. But everybody in his head is clearly no longer have a physical form. And in some cases, you hear people like Misato talking, and we know she's dead.
You hear a lot of people talking throughout this. You hear, obviously both Rei, but you also hear Asuka, who is super dead. Misato. You even hear Kaworu a couple times.
Yep.
So
you see Kaworu, and this is one of those things where I wondered if you're right. It doesn't really answer, I guess, that because he sees Asuka as a sex object at the beginning of this movie. Later, when Rei shows up, she says to Gendo, I have to go help him. And it's implied because she's now naked and all that sort of thing that it's like some sort of sexual object again. But then she turns into Kaworu at one point, and he goes from being terrified in his own head to all of a sudden being soothed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which not open to interpretation by the writer, but certainly open to interpretation by the physical look of the scene that they made.
Yeah, I think it you can read it as like Shinji has like homosexual feelings for Koru. Extremely, like, it's pretty obvious to me here.
Yeah. This is where I got a little,
and like, I don't even know that there is
here.
that much more plot until we get to the very end. A bunch of stuff happens. It's like some cool imagery. The animation is cool, I guess.
Well, the plot that matters here is whether or not you think. So, Shinji goes through instrumentality in a different way than in 25-26. Maybe it's not complete. We can talk about that at the end. But at a certain point in here, he tells Rei/Lilith that he rejects the world where there are no barriers between people.
And even if it means being hurt again and again, he would rather be himself than merged as one being or whatever.
Which feels, actually, this whole scene felt less earned than the original ending, to be honest. Because it's just kind of like a lot of imagery and him screaming a lot, and then people talking to him, rather than the "why did you do this? Why did you do this?" like trial thing that happened before.
Build up to it all.
And so there's definitely like, this is the part where people are saying like, is 25 and 26 non-prime? What is happening inside his mind here during some of these scenes?
Interesting.
Right. So I think right here is where I put those two episodes
Before
the first 25
ends.
and 26. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because the way that Shinji deals with the end of that the first 26 is coming to the conclusion of I belong here. Right? He shatters that shell that he's built around himself and finds a way to justify continuing his own personal existence.
What we're left with, though, is him having chosen that he wants instrumentality and doesn't want instrumentality, but it's unclear whether or not that's an individual choice for everyone else.
Oh, it is. They say that. They say that in 26 Prime, that everyone has to decide for themselves if they want to come back.
Yeah, so that, I mean, we can get to the ending here because I think it ties in pretty neatly. And you then see, so Shinji comes out of instrumentality, his mother in the Eva kind of drifts away into space or whatever. Unclear if this is like metaphor or she's actually drifting away into space. But he's kind of standing alone on the sea of LCL as this horrible, half face or whatever sinks. And there's a bunch of crosses and stuff. So it's like he's been there a while.
Is it? I thought the crosses popped up when I thought those were the same green crosses that had popped up.
No, there's ones made out of wood. Remember, there's one with Misato's cross hanging on it that Shinji had been holding.
Yeah. Okay.
And so he'd been there at least some amount of time. It's unclear how long before he sees Asuka pop up on the beach, or she appears or is there and he didn't notice, or
because he sees Rei first and is distracted.
Oh, right. Yes.
Oh, well, Rei is there, or Asuka's there when Rei is there, because we get the very Japanese over the boob shot.
I did notice that.
Yeah.
Which, they couldn't leave the ending of this to be any less worse.
Well, I think they made it worse because I wasn't exactly sure what to make of this very last scene.
I'll tell you what I read after you tell me what you think the last scene was.
Oh, that's the problem, is that I don't really know that I came to any satisfying conclusion about this. Because he realizes that Asuka is there and then tries to strangle her, and then she brings up a hand and strokes his face, and he can't bring himself to do it because he is still Shinji at the end of the day, which she reinforces with her last line of disappointing.
Or
Fade to black.
In English and slightly differently translated, disgusting, not disappointing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, sorry, disgusting.
Yep.
Yeah. Unclear to me here, though, still at the end of this is they've chosen to remain individuals on what? What planet are they on? Where are they? Because based on everything that's happened, they're going to starve to death if it's reality, quote unquote.
Yeah. Obviously, they don't really answer any of these questions.
Which means to me it's not really reality, right? Like they've chosen a path of ascension that is individual in nature, but they're not back to like Earth or anything like that.
Oh, I totally read it as they're like back on Earth.
And Earth is just
staring.
wrecked with a giant dead body on it.
Man, yeah, that whole thing was real. All of that stuff wasn't just imagery, it actually happened.
I see.
Okay. And that is in a lot of ways a worse, like I wish it made less sense that I read it that way, because it would be cooler if a lot of it was all like in his head or whatever. But no, like I read it as literally there was a giant being of white, who knows, whatever, and people literally turned into goo.
I tried to give it a more metaphysical ending than that.
I applaud your effort.
I'm really trying.
And I don't know that you're wrong either. Like there is definitely stuff to say. Is it like an Adam and Eve ending for these two? Are they the two new humans here? Are there other people, other places? We don't really see or know any of that at the end.
Yeah. One of the explanations for the ending that I read from the creator of this was that Shinji did this choking of her to understand whether or not he had been brought back to life, right? Like, or like it had been, if he was back in the world of individualism, because if he choked her, then he would feel something, and then if he felt something, then he knew it was real, which is a pretty gross way to think about, like, well, let's see, what are my options for understanding if Asuka's really here with me in this individual world? I'll just murder her, or get some sort of possible sexual gratification from trying to choke her out. Yuck.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah.
I don't want to drag people's thing that they like, but at the end of this, I'm left with as a feeling.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. It's kind of my first reaction to watching it as well. I don't think after the second watch that I feel terribly different than that. All the like Googling and wikiing and stuff has at least made me understand some of the stuff I didn't understand better, but it doesn't make me like it more.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Michael?
Yeah, these two episodes were definitely probably harder to watch than the original 26.
Being a movie and they could do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
Clearly they had way more budget for animation, right?
And leash to do things that weren't allowed on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the censorship level was like, what if we just showed blood everywhere all the time?
Boobs everywhere, eyeballs that show up out of forehead vaginas.
Yeah.
I just...
I'm sorry for making you all come on this journey with me.
I don't know that I hated it. I really wanted to get to a point, and I think they almost earned it with the show. Throw the movie away. They almost earned the last two episodes of that show. If there had been half an episode of plot before Shinji got into the version of instrumentality that was the show.
Yeah.
I think
it's
that's
almost earned.
That's what makes that so hard, is how abrupt it is.
Yeah, I think there is a version of that original ending that is very good. And maybe it incorporates some parts of this movie, but I don't think large parts of this movie. It would be more fun to believe that I didn't have to see large parts of this movie, but I could still have the ending I liked from the original show.
Yeah,
at least liked better.
I like the vagueness of the congratulations scene. In a way, I wish that you could sit there and think about it by yourself and be like, I have all these great ideas, but yeah, that's where we're left at the end of it. If you have significant thoughts? You think that there's something we should read regarding the show that we just totally missed? Or you think we didn't get deep enough? Michael?
Yeah, you should tell us about it by sending us an email at podcast@weweregamers.com. And we'll definitely discuss even more Evangelion next week when we read your questions and comments
we'll
on the air.
For sure do that. If it's interesting, we'll do it.
Oh yeah, definitely. We read everything we get sent. That is that is our promise to you, listeners.
All right. Well, thanks for this, JJ. I tried searching for like scholarly articles about this stuff, and it's all torpedoed by the fact that the creator comes out and says, no, it doesn't mean anything. Or like when there is something that's kind of like interesting and does mean something, he's like, this is exactly what it means. And it means basically exactly what you saw. You know, it's like, And yeah, there's a Christian motif that's laid on top of this that is so close to being useful, to being a plot point and to understanding it and to having thrown a lot of weight into a creation myth of like, yeah, this was like, hey, actually the earth has been born twice and this is the real story of Adam and Eve, right? Like,
yeah, especially in these last two episodes, I really wanted them to do a little bit more with all of that, the creation myth side of things.
Right, like the 3 or 4 more episodes of Gendo using Shinji to put Adam out there, and for him to reject Lilith in the end because Lilith wants instrumentality, and Asuka and he are into individualism, right? Like Asuka at the end of this chooses individualism. Okay, now you've got Adam and Eve. We're not in the Garden of Eden, which is the original Earth, right?
Yeah.
And so a new Earth is created with Asuka and Shinji, and Adam being some part of that could have helped, I think. Well, I guess they kind of screwed with that because they said Lilith was where the children of men came from, and Adam is where the angels come from, and
yeah, they throw it out too quickly and jumble it together a little too much.
A little bit, right? It's all just a little slightly bit not. I would love a show like this that is not connected all the way, much like Lost tried to do. Like your analogy was apt because it's just the threads aren't there, and then when they went 2 different directions, right? Lost connected them all, and you're like, well, this sucks. And Evangelion didn't connect anything, and you're like, well, is there a connection here?
Yeah,
like,
give me something.
Hey, author of this work, I don't need you to tell me what it means, but tell me, does it mean something? Oh, no, it doesn't mean anything. What? Okay. So there's like, I couldn't find any scholarly work on it.
That wasn't just like flat out refuted.
Well, that isn't, because every time you think about it, it's like, well, that's not what they said it means. So, I don't know, maybe in 20 or 30 years, people will lose the interviews and they'll... Man. Would you have been less uncomfortable if it was adults that they were using instead of kids?
I don't know, because part of the problem isn't just the fact that it's kids. Part of the problem is the treatment of women.
Yeah.
Right, and that's not going to get better, right? The scenes with Kaji and Misato didn't make me feel less uncomfortable because the two of them were adults.
Right, yeah. I think you'd get one less weirdness, which is Misato wouldn't have to try and be his mom, and then you wouldn't have that like scenes that they added in where, you know, you could lean in a little bit to the mental health aspect of Shinji's character and say he needs to be taken care of because he's having a hard time being able to get to do the things we want him to do. And, you know, that makes you have that cool writing where like they're using somebody that they shouldn't be using, and then Misato can fall for, you know, but like that's the only benefit of the adultness, and the rest of it, you're right, it doesn't matter that it's kids, it's just genuinely bad treatment.
Yeah, well, some of the scenes get more interesting if they're not kids, right? So Misato, like that ambiguous scene where she maybe throws herself at Shinji, kind of.
Yeah, but it's all Misato and Shinji that gets better. The rest of it's still bad.
Sure, the rest of it's still bad. I'm saying in little pieces, like things get not better, but more interesting, right? Because now Misato only has, it reinforces that she only has this one way of really opening herself up to adult relationships.
Which is
right?
really
that
trash too, in a way.
Yeah.
Because earlier in the film, and the work, I guess, it's not, you know, because it's different parts, but you were thinking, oh, okay, she's done this type of behavior before, but she's trying not to be that way. And then it's always just like, oh no, but actually I need to be taken care of. I was like, no, that's not what the character you were writing was.
Yeah.
So why are we doing this?
Or like Ritsuko's mother, right? If Rei is a grown-up, quote unquote grown-up, since she's not actually a real person, but if Rei's a grown-up, that changes the whole dynamic of that scene where she kills Rei.
Oh, the Gendo stuff in Rei becomes at least less disgusting.
Yeah, a little more tolerable.
Yeah.
So, maybe. But yeah, I think the worst flaws don't get any better if they're adults versus kids.
Blarg. People love it so much. I wanted to like really jump in with both feet, and it just kept getting pulled back out of it. I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, on a sort of meta level, I think it's really interesting to step back and see how this was kind of the birthing point of a lot of modern anime.
Oh, definitely, for sure. Like, you can see a lot of Gundam a little bit, where like, you know, there are Gundam shows where the machines connect to the pilots in a mental capacity. You can see a lot of the like newer-ish anime, actually, where it's like about death and life and all that sort of stuff, where they actually start to try and connect things a little better.
Yeah, like a little more slightly fluffier stuff too. Like there were times when it's definitely like, oh, that's where Sailor Moon took some of its inspiration from.
Sure. Is Sailor Moon before or after this, though?
Was it before?
Original Sailor Moon might be older than this.
Yeah, you actually might be right.
Yeah. Pretty sure. At least the manga is older. I don't know about the show. 91, 92.
Yeah, for the manga.
So slightly concurrent.
Yep.
I do believe the writer saying that this is a lot of me in here. And it makes me worried a little bit of like, ooh, God. Like, there's a lot of stuff in there that is not okay, dude. And reading about like why they came up with certain lines, like, I don't want to get into it on this podcast because it's kind of disgusting. But like, imagine these things that are like not okay, and then come up with lines, and it's just
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. But I was gonna say, but also I think that it's a product of its time. It really, really is. This would not get made again. And in fact, when they're remaking it, it seems like they're not making it this way again. These rebuild things sound very different a little bit now that I've read about them. Anyway.
Yeah, we didn't even get into the whole the the sort of few moments in the real world, quote unquote, at the end of 26 Prime.
What do you mean?
Where Shinji's it starts showing actual scenes from Japan, and Shinji's talking about well, the other voice is talking to Shinji about how he uses this fantasy world to escape reality, and it starts to bring up the questions of is this whole thing just a fantasy in the head of some real life little boy?
There's the theater scene and the sandbox too, right? So like the sandbox was interesting in a weird way, and I wish the sandbox and the theater were in the original ending, maybe, right? And then I'd be really happy, because the sandbox, if you notice the lights that are pointed at him.
Yes, there's stage lights.
There's stage lights, that's right, yeah. And then he's building the geofront in the sandbox. And then the theater scene, I wonder if it implied, like, he was some sort of teacher or something? Like, what was going on in that this theater was filled up with people and then empty and then filled up and then empty? But it was cool. I liked I like and I don't like implications when people are like, is it all a dream? Are you dreaming now? Is this a fantasy world? I'm like, if it's gonna be a fantasy world, please explain
how we got here.
Well, and what it means, especially at the end, right? Like where what's his fantasy then? He loves this girl in the real world, and so he like abuses her in his dreams. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means.
It's a trip, that's for sure.
We went on a journey.
Yes, we did.
Into
Terminal Dogma.
I'm gonna rename my home network Terminal Dogma. It's just such a good name. I wish there was stuff out there that's like this, and maybe this is a call for another email. I can put this at the end of this. Say, find other things that are like this where there's actual like scholarly work that you can do, and say, what does this mean? What does that mean? Because it's so hard to understand something on a visceral level from another country.
Yeah.
When it's this tied to the culture of the time, the place, etc. Like, I never lived through anything like that. I don't know the culture well overall, much less 20 years ago. And for the writer, it's like 40 years ago, right? Because he's at least 20 when he makes it.
Yep.
So you're talking about somebody born in the 60s or 70s that was making this. And it shows. You know, their parents fought in the war. Much like, things made in the 90s here. But, yeah. Yeah. I'm out of ideas.
I think we've covered just about all of it at this point.